would say number one, and this is what I look for in just about everyone. I want to see passion somewhere in your life, like that you care about stuff. And I don't care if they like spent the weekend, learning a brand new stitch in knitting, or built a hang glider from hand, or went 17 layers deep on whatever some season of the Expanse. Like that kind of passion for something is very, very tough to teach. Another leadership principle is having a high bar for quality. But I'm sure it's the wrong way to frame it, but it's some kind of like, I care that something I put out is of good quality, and I am happy with it. And if it goes badly, I feel bad.
Welcome to Next In, where today I have David Aronchick from Expanso as both the CEO and co-founder. Welcome, David. How are you doing today, and where are you coming from?
Thank you so much for having me. I am currently in Seattle, but usually it feels like I'm on the back of a plane.
Back of a plane. So home is in the sky, not on the ground. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly right.
Okay, so where have you flown most recent?
Well, I just got back from London. I was in London for board meetings, customer meetings, and also we had a Big Data London event, and then I was able to speak at Open UK, which is a effort they have going in the government, talking about how to share open data.
What was your favorite topic there? What was kind of like the most eye-opening thing that you heard?
Yeah, the government one. So I heard Big Data London was wonderful. There was a ton of people came through, and it was always fascinating to see even the largest organizations still really struggling with even the basics of big data. But I probably have to say the Open UK effort was really fascinating. There's so much data in government. They see the value in it. They see the opportunity to do things with it and want to light it up. But it ends up being very hard. Their expertise is in their domain, whatever, trains or healthcare administration or financial services or whatever, and not in how to host an API, how to host a database, things like that. And again, those aren't technically challenging. Everyone in the room was quite good, but it's like, how do you do it in a repeatable way? So you just have a lot of interest out there, and I think, I'll be honest. Open UK was one of the most advanced organizations. I've talked to a lot of other countries, and I would say they're doing really well. Making this available and seeing the value in it.
So do you think that some of their advancements is particularly because of implementing things like a GDPR really early on, and they've been in the trenches for a long time in comparison to the US? Because the US isn't they haven't implemented as strict requirements around data privacy, data regulations as Europe has. Do you think that plays a role in it?
Well, I'll be honest. The problem is that I don't think the US has done terribly much of anything, right? And that's not, again, it's not, I don't want to bang on the US, right? So if you go to, for example, one of the major scientific institutions here, or one of the major governments, more often than not, you'll go and they'll just have a CSV available, right? Or a tarball or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm able to get the data and do something with it, but it's not an API and it's not well structured. So that's what I mean. They haven't done much of anything. They have opened up a lot of it, but it's not like there's an API. Now, what you have is okay, we're going to have this, and then at some point there'll be a privacy regulation framework for how government should release its stuff. Then that comes out. Then after that, people are going to panic because they're wait, too much stuff is being released. We need to have a better way of doing this. And then there will be, and now it's costing us all this money to host the data. How do we do this in a more elegant way? And then there'll be an API, and so it doesn't work. So, you've seen this happen lots of times. So GDPR, I totally agree with. There will be GDPR and regulatory frameworks and things like that we will get to, just because that's the way the wind blows. But I don't think, it's not GDPR that encouraged the UK government to do this. I think the UK government is just hey, we're not going to be, developing the next best thing ourselves. We want our populace to do it, and so that's why they're opening up a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, which is really interesting, and I feel like we could have a 3-hour conversation about this, but
Yeah.
today we're not here to talk about data in the UK. Instead, we're gonna be diving into kinda your background, David, and you've had a really extensive and impressive background, whether that's, co-founding the startup that you're at right now, being the head of compute and data over at Protocol Labs, spending time at Microsoft, Google, Chef Software, and a lot of other places where you've been both an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, which is fairly unique for you, and it's been really kind of cool to see what you've been able to accomplish. And so, I will want to dive into how did Expanso get started, and what does that mission look like, and what are you doing? But before we get there, I really want to go back to potentially the beginning, which is like, how did we even get to the place of wanting to be into engineering? Like, help me understand that story. Help me understand the David in middle school or high school that was going to getting ready to go to college and trying to figure out what he wanted to do in the first place. I want to understand where you believe that kind of ignited and started.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a really, odd background to say the least. I wanted to go off and be a doctor. Um, that was what I pursued when, all through high school and college and so on. And then only when I got out of college did I like end up making a turn. Under the hood, I'd always been interested in computers. Like it was just so like powerful, and it kind of like got pulled in from just gaming, but like I'd been doing programming forever. Um, and it's just very interesting. It's how my brain is wired. Like I have to tear it apart. I have to understand how it works, and so on and so forth. And because gaming was like the entry point there, that was very natural. Once I got out of college and I went to work at the NIH, which is in the U.S., the National Institutes of Health. Again, still pursuing being a doctor, and while I was there, I happened to be taking some software engineering classes at night just because I was fascinated in it, and hit it off with one of the profs, and that was my first startup. And so I've always been self-taught as a programmer. I think every engineer I've worked with is like, yeah, we could tell. It's just a natural passion of mine. And, in my other window, in my other Chrome browsers or my other browsers, I have, half of it is like HubSpot and doing sales, and the other half is like raw coding.
Interesting, interesting. So when you said gaming was like one of the natural entry points, was that like, hey, I started dabbling and hacking, or was it I was just playing and it was like really kind of fascinating? How did this get up into my screen?
I mean, it did feel like it was somewhat of a creative endeavor. Like, way back in the day, I was lucky enough to go to some schools that really kind of like adopted Commodore 64s and Logo and all these various tools, and it was just fun to like engage in that level of, hey, if you type these words and present this thing, the computer does what you tell it to do. So yeah, I can't remember any moment where it just started, but like it's just addictive once you get that sense of like, hey, I can make this thing do what I want. It's really, really powerful and pulls you through.
And so you had a couple of areas where it was like, hey, went out, skipped, like started, pursuing this coding thing. You had a startup, and then you went into enterprise, and then you had a startup, and then you went into enterprise. Like, what made you really early on try to start your own company, and then what inspired you to like get into like a thing like company like a Microsoft and a Google, and then go back? So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of that.
For sure. So it is a really interesting question. I again, I had a really kind of interesting career. I was when I first got going. The internet was just on fire. There was the bubbles and just news articles every day about like how much great stuff was happening, and there was a feeling like there was a sense of power that was like flipping everything on its head at that time. And by that I mean, it was one of these things where you felt more than ever before that like you didn't have to go through the standard path in order to go off and be successful and have people listen to you. There were, 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and changing the face of cable and publishing and so on and so forth. So it just like there was this new angle out there that was just incredibly powerful. So I went. That was very much it. When I got my first two startups going, that was the path that I was taking, and I was just like, I'm going to go and build this thing into something amazing. Um, then we kind of like had some bumpy roads along both of the startups. Both exited, but like much later, later after I left. And then I was like, well, I'm pretty good at this tech thing. I want to go learn how to build software and ship software and so on and so forth. And that's what I did. And I just, I had some friends who were working at Microsoft. They say it's great here. You got to come. And that felt like a place to go do that. And so I went and did that for a bunch of years. Then another internet bubble, another like thing. I went out and I founded my own company and led that for 6 years. Exited that, and then I started bouncing along in the really continuing to be very big companies, Chef and Amazon and Google, and then back at Microsoft. And that's you had a decent reputation. You like know you're doing good work and you care about moving the ball forward. And that's something that I will say, like, I don't think there's one thing right or wrong about either. People like love to beat up on big companies because they take so long and so on and so forth. Yeah, well, the reason they take so long or they do all this stuff is because they have hundreds of thousands of customers and millions, billions of potential users, and so like you just have to be more thoughtful about it. And so you can do something there that has an enormous impact with way less effort than somewhere else. Now that said, like we can at my current company or any of the startups, you can pivot 5 times a week if you want, and it's just you making those decisions, but at the same time like any one of those pivots doesn't affect very many people, so relatively speaking anyway.
Yeah, so it's always like, what is the level of impact and complexity that you want, and what is the level of impact and complexity that you can comprehend and understand and want to actually have interest in, right?
100%. 100%.
Which I find that to be a really interesting conversation at times, which is how does your brain work, and then like can you think of like edge cases, or are you just trying to ship new features to ship new features?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
So let me ask you this, right? So you've clearly, again, had a very successful career. Like you've gone the entrepreneurial route where you've gotten promoted several times. You've taken the leap of faith on yourself and have been able to have successful exits, as you've mentioned. What do you believe allowed you to get promoted? What allowed you to start getting elevated in comparison to your peers?
That is a really interesting question. It's funny because like I don't think that I'm particularly well suited for big company life. That's not to say I wouldn't go back to big company. I really enjoyed it, and I absolutely would go back. But I don't have that natural DNA to like say, okay, this is the path we're going to go through, and so on and so forth. The biggest successes I've had in my career, I led Kubernetes for a few years when I was at Google from a product management side. And there the wave was coming. They just need, I happened to be at the right place, right time as this product was taking off, and there was all this motion, and Google was growing in its Google Cloud efforts. So there were a lot of things that came together really well, and obviously that has paid off really well. And then while I was there, I also started Kubeflow, which just needed to be the framework just needed to exist. We just kept hearing from customer over and over again, how do we do this? How do we launch it? How do we this? How do we that? So there was that as well, and in that case, in both cases, there was certainly a right place, right time. There was also here's the demand, like this screaming demand from the customers, and being able to frame that as a set of internal priorities, like against internal priorities, is incredibly important. So with Kubernetes, for example, we knew we wanted to build into the container ecosystem, started by, the real advent of containers kind of got going around Docker and some of the work that they had done, making it user friendly and consumable and things like that. They deserve an enormous amount of credit. And we were like, this is the way everything should go. People shouldn't be building on VMs, so on and so forth. So for us, we knew that this was an internal priority. We knew our cloud was built to run containers, and we wanted to get that out the door. And so, like, that was the most important part: map the momentum in the marketplace to our priorities and have those come together to a joint strategy. Same deal with Kubeflow, right? Like, so you look at Kubeflow, and we knew that Kubernetes was a big priority. We knew that people were having trouble getting pipelines, ML pipelines going, AI pipelines going, and we knew it had to be a framework that didn't involve people always going to a centralized API, because that is super expensive and so on. So from that perspective, we're just like, okay, well, this is our priority. Let's figure out how to go about it, and then map into that. But I definitely don't. It's a failing of mine, and I'm an old man now, and so I still don't understand. Like, I haven't figured it out, but like, I definitely still move way faster than organizations want. Which I'm not saying that as a good thing or a humble brag or something. Like, it's also not like, you can only move as fast as the river is going, for better or worse. Like, trying to paddle against it or trying to paddle in the wrong direction, like, you're gonna have a bad time, and I do have a lot of bad times.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's like your superpower is like listening to the customer and understanding on what needs to be executed.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also the thing that gets you in trouble is understanding and wanting to execute when you
yep,
hear customer problems.
yeah,
So
yeah.
catch 22, two-sided blade
Yeah,
where
and I definitely don't, like, this is not me, like, beating up on organizations. They're like, oh, go listen to me, like, you're why are you doing this all wrong, blah 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 blah. No, I am not saying that in the least. It's just like, if you're gonna build a great organization, it'd be wonderful if you could do both, but that is very unlikely, because the superpower of being, wanting to move fast and wanting to listen to customers and build something out very quickly, like, lots of, that can lead to a situation where your organization has organ rejection, and so you really do need both.
And so when you've tried to figure out the pros and cons of that, right? Like one of the things that I'm super passionate about is like continuous learning, continuous education, continuous
Mhm.
improvement, all of that stuff. Like what have you done to like help yourself when because there is a strength and there is a superpower where it's like, cool,
Mhm.
customer problem, we have solution, we want to deliver, but you could have a million requests from all of your customers, right? And I think as a product manager, you see that all the time where it's like Google could have one of a bazillion requests. It's like
Mhm.
what did you do for continuous learning and continuous education to be able to understand how do I create priorities? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I make sure that I'm making the right decision and the right choices? Because that sounds to be a really big strength of yours.
Yeah, so I'm definitely one of these people who, like, I've had lots of people reporting to me, and I've worked with other very large organizations, so I'm not so naive as to say, like, oh, everyone, we can just move faster, and so on and so forth. I want to bring everyone along, because if you do that and you do it properly, then you get a motion in place that's really valuable. What I'll say is that, in order to try and help myself, I really do always try and align myself with the global goals, right? Because that's, trying to, like, fix, or trying to, like, go against global goals, you're just going to have a bad time. I always say this to anyone who has a organization of any size of reporting. If you are not if anyone in the organization can't look at their goals and map it really cleanly into their managers' goals, into the managers' goals, into all the way up to the top level, then you're going to have a bad time, right? And so, what does that mean? Well, like, let's take a generic one, right? A top level goal might be, we're going to increase revenue by 20%, next year. Great. So that, like, and again, organizations don't have singular goals. They're going to have like multiple of them. They're going to say we want to add, 50 logos, or we want to add this or that. And then you say, okay, so now who's responsible? Well, maybe billing needs to get fixed. Maybe this feature needs to get out. Maybe we need to have this GTM that like is going to go into this market, whatever. So that becomes a thing. And then inside that, inside of engineering, maybe someone is literally working on this particular API, and they're like, well, how does this map to revenue? And it's like, well, that's your job. Your job is to figure out how that maps to revenue. It unblocks something. It is a desired feature by a customer. It is you heard it on a conference floor. I don't know, right? It's up to you. But if you're working on something that you can't draw that mapping, you're going to have a bad time. And again, it doesn't all have to be to one, and it doesn't have to be to all of them either, right? Like, ideally, you should be picking one of those top level goals and be able to map it out. And I think that's one of the biggest things. So in the things that I have launched, I've tried very hard to do that mapping. It can be one of those things where, even with that mapping that's crystal clear in your head, other people may not understand that. And so again, that's up to you to kind of like have those conversations and move it there.
Where did you learn that? Like, at what point in your career? Because, like, to your point, you're like, not everybody understands that. Like, do you remember when you were like first had your aha moment where I was like, oh, got it. Like, this
I
makes sense.
Honestly, I think I probably learned it from my employees or my teams, right? Like, because it would be one of these things where it's like, I would go out there and I'd stand in front and I'd say, okay, these are our OKRs, or this and this, and off we go. And then, well, people are like, well, what am I, how do I help with this? I was like, well, you're working on that. And they're like, well, how does this help that? And you're like, let's figure it out, right? Or stop working on this, or add a goal, right? You can do that too. It's fine, but it's the idea of continuously learning this, like, you do have to listen. There are a couple of like amazing, whatever. They're kind of trite, but I do love to say them. So one is, the purpose of an organization, or the purpose of a thing, a system, is the output, right? So I don't care what you have it set up as. What's coming out the other side? Because that's what the purpose is. So either you change the output, figure out how to make the output better, or you accept that this is the purpose, and then off you go. And that's really important. And then but at the same time, the other half of it is like really listening to your employees. And again, it's almost never the correct case that they didn't listen to you, or that your message, they misinterpreted, right? Because again, what you said landed somehow, right? And what they took away is what they took away. And if one person thinks that thing, then likely more people think that thing. And so, sure, maybe it is 180 degrees from what you wanted it to be, but that's the reality. There's no way around that. And so, like, then it's up to you. Do you accept the way it landed, or do you try a new tact at messaging it?
Yeah, so that actually kind of leads me into one of the other things that I like to talk about a little bit here, which is like, personally, I know that I have probably learned through some of my mistakes and some of my failures more than I have just my successes, right? Especially in a leadership capacity, where there's been lots of times where I've accidentally made mistakes, and was totally exposed because of my teammates being able to point fingers and be like, "Oh, is that what you meant to say?" Kind of like what you're talking about, right? Which is like, what I said might have had a 180-degree shift from the direction I was wanting to actually go. Do you have an example of that where maybe you accidentally made a mistake? Because I think a lot of people are afraid that if they make mistakes, they won't ever be able to get promoted the way that you have, or be the CEO of an organization where like failure is not an option. And I think at times I believe failure is a gift. So curious if you can imagine a moment where like the failure was a gift and it taught you a really valuable lesson that allowed
I,
you to.
I am definitely in that camp. Failure is a gift, right? Because if nothing else, that means you've gotten signal back, right? The worst thing in the world is when you toss something out and you get nothing back. I mean, it's just miserable. So any feedback is a gift. Failure is fine. Um, there's so here's a one secret thing or whatever. There is zero work involved in being a CEO or being a founder. Zero. Like, I can do it. I can go found a company this afternoon for $17, right? Those things are meaningless. It is whether or not you do something that is different. So now you're like, okay, well, I want to be a CEO that has meaning. All right, well, now you have two paths, right? Path one is inside of an existing organization, and there you're going to mostly have to follow the game. Um, if you have a failure, your responsibility is to own the failure, understand to the microcosm why it failed, how you would have do it differently, and then that's nothing but positive. I'd hire someone who had 17 failures if they knew exactly why. Um,
But the key there is like having the curiosity to go, I
Absolutely, you've
why
got
did
to understand why.
and you're like, what did I've always gone like, what did I do first to cause the mistake before I start looking at other people and going,
Yeah,
they're the responsible party. It's like, what could I how did I contribute and what could I have fixed? And then
100%.
collectively, how do we go?
And one of the things that causes big organizations to move slowly, that we were talking about before, is they try to avoid failure. That's almost exclusively why it is. And so when you see an organization taking forever, it's because, I don't know, we got to put a blog post out. Well, last time we did a blog post, it referenced a geopolitical whatever failure, or a sensitive issue, or had 17 misspellings or whatever. And so they're like, all right, well, fine. Now we have to go. We have to take this blog post, put it in front of legal, and put it in front of PR, and put it in front of and then all of a sudden, putting out a blog post takes 4 weeks. So that's what they do. They almost always move slowly because they're trying to prevent failure. The better path is to have a pattern where you say, this is what we're going to. This is what we want to achieve with this thing. This is what we're going to watch as this goes out, and this is what we're going to tweak along the way. And understanding really, really clearly what your one-way doors are, and then understanding what isn't, right. And so your one-way doors could be, I don't know, I mean, like, to some degree, it is a weird situation, but like, I don't know, but posting a tweet. It's not really a great one because you can always delete the tweet. But the problem is the internet has a memory, so they're going to go back and look at for the deleted tweets or something like that. But like, that's what gets out the door. But like, if you had a bad tweet, but it wasn't like terrible, a misspelling or something like that, then who cares, right? Don't bother. It's not to say you shouldn't have some processes in place to do grammar check or other things like that. But like, you
Some
know,
of those things get crazy, man. I had a client, which I'm not going to name the name of the client, but I
no,
had a client that their CEO wrote a tweet that they supported Texas decision for pro-choice.
okay,
And immediately 35% or 40% of their clients uh, pulled out of their contracts, and he had to
wow,
step down as CEO because of a tweet that said he was in Atlanta and was like, I support Texas's decision for the decision that they made. And that one simple tweet brought the whole house down.
crazy.
And it is wild how like little things like that can make a huge impact. And some people don't look at those things.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'll be honest. Like that. That is. It is rare that kind of thing happens where there's not something else under the hood, right? You again. Every culture is different, so on and so forth. But if you said this person did this thing, and it came from the company, and this was our pattern for doing it, and we made a mistake, we've deleted the tweet, and that's not who we are. um then unless something they have something else like under the hood, that should be enough. It's pretty rare that like customers are gonna like freak out about this. But I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but a lot of times it will be, this is the straw that a lot of other things, basically cascaded down into. So again, it goes back to the larger framework. Really understanding what your one-way doors are, understanding what your public face is, having a philosophy, these kind of things. These are all incredibly important, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to move slower. It just means you have to be very cognizant about what you're doing and what you're not.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because we've been talking a little bit about like processes, decisions, workflow, whatever, like go, don't go, you know, what I want to understand a little bit is like obviously you've started your own company. You likely have some foundational principles that you've brought into your company that you live, eat, sleep by. What are some of your like leadership foundational principles that you believe anyone should have, in your opinion, on day one?
It's funny. I spent some time at Amazon. I really actually like a lot of their leadership principles, though. I will be honest. There's some things I don't like about them because they conflict and they can be used kind of like arbitrarily. But there's a lot of real value in there. Um, I would say number one, and this is what I look for in just about everyone. I want to see passion somewhere in your life, like that you care about stuff that, and I don't care if they like spent the weekend, learning a brand new stitch in knitting, or built a hang glider from hand, or went 17 layers deep on whatever, some season of the Expanse. Like that kind of passion for something is very, very tough to teach. So that's something I very, very much want to see. The other thing is a leadership, and I expect that certainly in my leaders. Another leadership principle is having a high bar for quality. Like, and it doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. I go look at my Twitter feed. I have so many mistakes in there. It's crazy. But like, I'm sure it's the wrong way to frame it, but it's some kind of like, I care that something I put out is of good quality and I am happy with it. And if it goes badly, I feel bad. Now, I'm not asking people to feel bad from an organizational perspective, but if someone cares about something like a lot, they should care, and they will do all the things that are impossible for you to train and impossible for you to write down into a recipe, right? Like, if someone put out a piece of material and the piece of material felt like super cookie cutter and so on, you know and put that in front of a customer, the customer like, thanks, and then just kind of walks away. you know the first question is like, okay, well, why didn't the customer resonate with this? But like, are you happy with this? Right? I want to hear them say, I'm happy with this. No, I was just doing it to make someone else happy. Well, that's not okay, right? Like, that's where you really have to push back and say, I want this thing.
You're like, well,
Um,
it was supposed to get done, so it got done. But you're
yeah,
like, oh,
exactly. And
just because.
I'd rather you do less than at high quality than more. But on the other hand, you can do a lot as long as you frame it properly, right? So you could say someone can put out, 140 different, documents. I mean that there's an extension that goes too far there, but someone could put out a whole bunch of like documents or other things like that that are, only half done as long as they frame it properly, right? The real danger is they're like, no, this is great,
Is
and
half
then you go in three
it.
sentences in and you find like a spelling error or like miscapitalization or whatever. You're just like, did you even read this? Like, are you happy with this? Does this sentence make sense? Because again, those are the kind of things where it just comes from culture. It's very, very hard to like I said, write all this down and point back at this and say like, hey, you violated this incredibly important thing. What are you doing?
Yep. So how do you maintain that culture? Because like part of what I like to talk about at times too is just like when you're interviewing people, there's always this catch 22. Am I hiring more because of fit? Am I hiring because of
Mhm.
more skill? How do you balance the two? Because in this case, you're like, I really want somebody that has passion. Great, that's culture, and somebody that has a high quality bar. That's skill. So it's like, how do you balance those? Where do you evaluate those? And where is that give and take?
Um, let's see. How do I balance? I don't know. I mean, like, a lot of it comes down to there are some things that you just have to set as an organization that are the culture, and I was just listening to a podcast, a wonderful podcast by the guy who founded Frame, and they had this thing which I really liked. It was a cultural thing. You know, they're very design focused, front end or kind of useful tool for visual design, videographers and things like that. And one of the things that they did that I thought was really interesting is they had if I remember it right, they had a Friday review of new features with all of the executive team. And the moment they would go through the executive review, and the early ones, they would do it and they'd get, a few steps in. And the moment the thing had a bug, like down to a single pixel being off, they would say, okay, this is done. Like we're done with this review. Go back and fix this, fix anything else, but this is done. And it's not going to go out the door until, we get through this with no pixel failures. So they did that a couple times. And then they didn't do reviews for months because they were trying to build this into the culture. And the teams were like, look, we don't want it. We know it's not perfect, so we're not going to put it in front of him or them, the entire leadership team. And then they started doing pre-reviews and so on and so forth. And then they started doing it, and they haven't, apparently they haven't canceled one for years at this point because the culture became part of it, right? So there's this you say, how do you maintain this culture? You just have to continually drive it down. You have to continually say, these are the things that I consider to be important. These are the things that I don't. These are the things that we consider to be important. And you have to just, like I said, continually drive that down into every single person in the organization. But if it ever feels like, it's somebody else's responsibility for culture, to enforce culture, to observe culture, then you're already losing.
Interesting. So you're like, if it's a single threaded person, we're losing because it's not spread across the organization and
Because that person is gated by physics. There's 168 hours in the week. That's it. There's no way to manufacture more hours. Period. And so even if that person spent every single second of every single day enforcing the culture, once you get to a certain number of people or a certain number of activities or something, they will never be able to do it. So then what? You have an entire culture team? No, it's all ridiculous. It's got to be distributed. It's got to be internalized into every single person.
so if you have a startup, they're 2 years in and they constantly seem to have culture problems, what advice would you give to that founder?
Um, well, understand what you care about, right? Like, if there's a cultural issue, the first thing I want to understand is what the issue is, right? So it's, hey, we're not shipping fast enough, or we ship bad quality, or we do this, or we do that. And again, it goes back to that saying that the purpose of an organization is what its output is, right? And so my argument would be to them look, obviously you don't care about culture, or your organization is built for this, right? Do you want to change that? Okay, well then let's change it. It's not about doing these kind of at the beginning it'll be you do these gatekeeping things like the product review or whatever, but that's again that doesn't scale very well either. What is necessary is saying, okay, how do we have everyone understand that this is valuable and that we are driving towards that. And it, by the way, it is also perfectly okay to say, hey, we actually don't care about this, whatever it is, right? We're just not going to have a UK presence or whatever, right? Instead of having one person there who has too little time. Okay, so then decide that, but don't want something and do nothing to implement it.
Interesting. So I want to make sure that we get to understanding Expanso. What inspired it? What do you do? Are y'all hiring? Help me understand kind of your guys' situation over at Expanso right now.
Yeah. So I like to say there are three immutable things going on right now. Data is getting bigger. Networking is not keeping up, and regulations, particularly around data, are growing. And those things are immutable. Nothing is going to change that forever. Um, all the systems we have for managing this data and processing this data and so on and so forth tend to be very centralized right now. And those work really badly against those three things that are never going to change. It doesn't say permanently. It just is one of these things where it's like you need other tools in order to build this. When I was at Protocol Labs, they have an enormous network of storage around the world. And they're like, look, we're running into this issue right now where people want to make use of this data but don't know how. And so they were like, hey, go work on this thing. And that's exactly what I went and did. So I built a platform that takes your compute jobs, whatever they might be, changing data, compressing it, filtering it, doing model training, whatever, allows you to execute it in a million different locations. And then have that complement your existing centralized systems. And that together is basically, why we built this platform. It's very much inspired by my experience on Kubernetes, on Kubeflow, around ML and AI. But it is a platform that's designed to be, very, very general. And so, we've had a lot of success. We've been around 2 years. We got funded by General Catalyst and HETS and Array Ventures, Protocol Labs and Samsung. And the lot of them together help us, give us a ton of space and runway and so on in order to, build out this new platform. We are hiring. We're hiring some social media management. We're hiring engineering. But we also are, we're very much in startup mode, so we want to keep it very, very tight until we've really hit that kind of product market fit velocity.
So if somebody were wanting to apply to Expanso, what would they need to do to stand out?
I mean, it's some of the stuff I talked about at the beginning. It's a lot of that work around showing passion. Get plugged in. We're an open source project. You can come join the community, so on and so forth. We would love to have people join in and start to express interest. If you're like, hey, this is my industry. It depends on what your role is, but this is my industry. Like I'm already in DevOps, or I'm already in cloud computing, or I'm in the energy sector. I think we could use you, so on and so forth. It's that kind of like, we have a lot of material out there. Go understand the product, understand what you care about, and so on. And I'll be honest, like it's hard because I'm well aware of what the job market looks like out there, and you don't. It's very, very hard to say like, well, I want to go see 100 of these, or I want to go apply to 100 different jobs and do that level of depth for each. But then you're not going to stand out. That said, I mean, I read every resume, so it's not like
Yeah. So
uh,
so it's like for you, it's just like you guys are an open source project. So step one, get into our community and play
yeah,
around with it and
yeah,
tinker and like know what we do. Step two is like from what I heard earlier today, one of the things that really stood out to me is just like you talked about making sure that somebody understands ROI and metrics and value and like how are they adding to the business. So in my personal opinion, what I heard is like if you can measure what was success on your team and how did it as
yeah,
business
yeah, yeah.
rather than just technical jargon, you're like, that would really resonate with me because it's something that you value. It sounds like you value. Do you understand how your role connected with the greater picture, and can you put that on your resume?
Yeah, exactly.
That sounded
Exactly right. So that's the killer thing. And I can't tell you how many people. It's a super red flag on a resume when someone says, I worked on this, right? Like, because then it's not really like, what did you do? Like, especially if it's a team or whatever. So,
accomplishments, achievements, goals. What were?
exactly.
How
What
did
did
you?
you do? How did you make this happen? Even if it's a big team, like tell me your things. And then it's okay to like bubble up to the overall team output and what the measures were, because it is tough to say like a lot of times, especially if you're in a big team, like, oh, I shipped this particular API and revenue went up by blah. But like the extent to which you can detail some of that, that's really powerful. And understanding where you fit in the overall organization around that execution, I think is super powerful.
So somebody wants to get a hold of you. What is the best way to get a hold of you or somebody else on the Expanso team, David?
Well, obviously we send a million emails. Emails is super easy for me. I respond to everything. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Blue Sky. So it's super easy to reach out to me directly, and I like to respond to everything. But jump in our Slack or jump in, a million different community endpoints that we have, and make it happen.
I'm embarrassed to ask this. I have no idea what Blue Sky is.
Oh,
Mid mid
it's Twitter before Twitter went downhill. So it's doing really well. It's a great community, super passionate and really fun. Tens of millions of users and so on.
huh.
Uh, I'm I'm suggesting most folks move over. Like, it certainly doesn't have any kind of like uh, thumb on the scale against towards a particular political view. It's much more open and a lot of fun.
Interesting. Well, if you want to get a hold of David, revert back to the last 30 seconds and kind of go through all the social platforms, follow him, connect with him, follow Expanso, and watch all of the incredible things that they're getting ready to do and what they're currently doing today. And for everybody that joined us today, I appreciate you. If you have questions, drop some comments below. Otherwise, appreciate it. Appreciate you, David, and looking forward to next time.
Terrific. Thank you so much.